Okay, so we've got the bombs all painted, and what we've done is I've got a little bit of silver down here. We just tapped the nose in every time just to give it the silver top for the actual detonator. So that one's done absolutely fine. So obviously we want to sort of weather up these fuel tanks. Whoops. So as you might be able to see, I've got on the close-up at least, you might be able to see I've got some chipping effect on there. Now there's a little technique I've been doing for many a year. So what I tend to do, get some aluminium foil and get yourself a sort of 5-inch square of it, just like that, okay? And all you do is stuff it down onto itself and make a ball, quite loosely, so it's nicely scrunched, but nothing too tight. You don't want it to be, you know, obviously right on the top. Take your silver paint, and say, got it down here, this is my old glue mark area. So what we do, we take a bit of paint and make it quite thin. Don't make it thick, because you don't want to flood this foil. Okay, and this is just my quick, easy chipping. Okay, so make sure it's evenly spread, just like that. Come along with your your ball. Okay, don't squash it down onto it, but just lightly roll it in, just a little bit. Okay, then come up to your object and roll it on, and it goes on just like that. So if I bring you in just a little bit, you can see the type of effect we're getting. But it's just like that. So literally come along, roll it in your paintwork, have it on your container, and then just roll it on your container. And that way you get a nice chipping effect, and obviously it's not flooding the area. And you can go over it a few times and you get different types of chipping and wear and tear. And if you push down quite hard, you'll get quite heavy ones. And then all you do is rotate the ball. Just don't handle this hand with your area, because otherwise you'll end up with obviously things on there. But you should be able to go around it, just like this. I'll put on some nice, but I say don't just push it down too hard, because otherwise you'll lose the raised areas with your foil. But there we go, something just like that, you might be able to see, just on the bottom. So we just come along the top now, and we just grab a few more around here at the top, a few down the sides. Okay, so we're not trying to totally over the top, we're just trying to give this a banged in, weathered look. Okay, so we're just going to come along, okay, pick a different area. You can just give it a bit of a tap. And there we go, that'll give you a scraped in type of effect. And it just gives it effect like chipping, but by using the old tinfoil scrunchy ball, and then afterwards you can bin it and you're all done. And as I say, that's those two done. We'll let them dry, and then what we can do is we're going to weather them up separate to going onto the aircraft. So we just say make sure that silver's dry, and then we're going to come along and we're going to put some black wash through the actual airbrush, and then the same way as we wash the underside, we're going to wash these fuel tanks, and then at the same time we've got the black wash out, we're actually going to airbrush it all onto the actual weapon. So what I'm going to do now is put the sway braces on, which have been sprayed silver as well. That's these little guys all down here, all these hundreds of them down the bottom, and so that's number one on this sprue sheet. Fix them, fix the bombs to it, and we're going to airbrush it black. Those are black as well. Put it to one side. We're going to airbrush them weathering onto the little missiles as well, the air-to-air missiles, and then once they're all weathered up and everything, we can get the clear parts onto the model, and then we can get on with just the final details, and then we get the weapons fitted, and then we're all done. Okay then, so moved on nicely, all weathered up with the fuel tanks, everything else like that. Hasn't had a flat coat, just going to leave them in their raw state. They're quite handleable, no problem at all, just don't come along with wet fingers, but it gives us that nice sort of drizzling effect underneath that you get where they collect at the bottom of tanks and things like that. So there we go, a couple of things we're going to get on with now. Obviously we've been putting on these aerials, as we've said, we've got them painted up and done now. So also we're going to put on the clear parts. Now using the clear parts, you could just use a standard sort of PVA glue, which is no problem at all, or you could use something like a gator glue, any type of sort of clear glue you want, that as long as it dries totally clear, that way it doesn't matter if you smudge it a little bit. So obviously we've got, these are going on last because they're, yeah, the actual aircraft's had a flat coat and we're happy how it's looking. You don't want to put them on before, otherwise what it'll do is obviously fog up your clear parts. So all we're doing now, we're just popping out a few of the little lenses and lights. So what we got here, we've got the end ones. So we just take this out. Now I like to use, I must admit, Gator glue. I find it very grippy, and the great thing about it, it does dry totally 100% clear, which is quite important. So if we just bring this one over here, like so. Obviously, port side of the aircraft, which is always the left-hand side of the aircraft, is always red. Green on the other side, it's obviously the international collision markings, and that way everyone passes port to port. Now make sure you've got a nice clean cut as it came off. If you use a very fine polishing stick, that type of thing you take out seams with, and you can clean up the part no problem. So that one's okay, that's a nice fit actually. So what we're going to do, first of all, we're going to test fit it, just to make sure it goes on quite nicely, and there's no real problems to it. Now these are actually a truly amazing fit, because we haven't even used glue, and it's poked on there absolutely lovely. So there we go, that's quite a nice fit with that one. Very happy with how that one's gone on there like that. Now obviously you could leave it, depending on how tough that is in. See, it seems to be in quite tough. What we're going to do, normally I said I use a clear glue, but because that is such a good fit, what I'm going to actually do, just give it a tiny touch of thin glue. Now that will immediately go around, the capillary action will zip around and lock that in place. Now as long as I don't touch that, it won't fog up at all and we'll be absolutely fine. Now we've also put in, you might be able to see just down in here, if we can get you to a point where you can see it, there it is. This little guy here at the top, this one in here, just down here. Here he is. That's a little button one. Now I had to make that hole a little bit bigger because it wouldn't go in. So then what we've done, gone in there, pushed that in PVA glue first, and then pushed it on top. And then if we flip this guy over carefully, running out of places to hold this now. Okay, what we should find under here, there it is this one here. Now, as we said before, it says just covered up with lights. Get that going out. What we're going to do, we're going to grab a little bit of the Gator glue and the cocktail stick, going to come around, and what we're going to do is just touch the outside, just run it around the outside part like that. Okay, then if you get a cocktail stick, flatten off an end to it so it's nice and blunt. Okay, lick it. What should happen is you should be able to pick it up and it'll stick to the end. Now actually, to be totally honest, that's not the best cut in the world on that. So what we're going to do, just grab a very fine sanding stick. Okay, so I'm going to use the blue side here. It just rounds this guy off. Now it's quite difficult to hold on to it because it is rounded like this, but hopefully you might be able to see there. We've got it just like this. What we do is just taking off the edge. Okay, look this one again. Hopefully, quite a heavy one this. Can't get it to stick. Always the way when you do it. Normally this works so well. What we'll do, we're just going to grab a tiny bit of blue tack, just a little tiny bit on the end of your finger like that. Okay. Pushing it and wrapping it around the needle. Okay, touch. So we've got him, hold of him like this, then we can come along and insert that in, and then if we twist as we let go, I'm hoping it's going to stay in place. And there we go, that little guy's on there now. So we just push him in place. And there we go, that gives us our light. Very happy. Same thing again, if you wanted to, you can just come along with a tiniest bit of glue and literally just touch and let the capillary action zip all the way around. So that's the lights done like that. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to do the other lights and bits and pieces, and also at the same time, like back here, we're going to actually paint up these the fuel pipes, exhaust pipes coming off. They are very, very fragile because I've bent and knocked them so many times. So we'll give that a touch of glue on the edge and that one, just to strengthen them up. So we're quite happy how that's all looking. And then obviously you can fit off the pylons and bits and pieces you want underneath. We're going to uncover this light, this sensor here at the front. Going to scrape all that away in a moment with a cocktail stick to reveal that. And then we're really ready for final assembly. Okay, so this is really the last sort of final assembly of all the little bits on there. So as I said, we've got all the aerials on, and you might be able to see down here on the close-up, if I just move it back, one of the little tricky areas on this one has been these little guys just down here, these little tiny areas. Now I put them on with a little PVA, and then I've gone around, and actually if I remove the fuel probe, I've gone around and then just touched them in with paint. The other little problem you might be able to see just down in there as well, you see a little bit of silver running around here? That's because I didn't paint far enough in, fitted the canopy on, and obviously I'd done the top of the instrument panel black, but it left a small gap. So actually what I've done is just grabbing a little bit of the stuff. I used a little bit of lead wire, just some stuff like this, and then all we did, get a bit out to show you. We got some, cut it in half, put it through, and then tapped it down to act. And it actually looks like now the sort of demister little holes that have around there. So also it's covered that gap quite nicely because it was very noticeable. Not so much from that angle, but when you're actually looking straight down or from the front, you know, inwards, you could see it. So now with this bit of lead wiring there, it's really helped take care of that. The other thing we've done as well is the nose cone. So as we see in here, you can see we've got some wiring and things going on. So when this is all finished, as you'll see in the final reveal photos, this is going to then click on just on the front here. Again, drawing you to the close-up, that's going to come in just like this, and that way we've got some nice hosing and things going on, and the wiring will loop then into it, but it just makes it all a little bit more interesting as it goes in there, and sort of livens it up, for want of a better word. Okay, weapon systems, as I said, we did a lot of, showed you the chipping and things like that on these fuel tanks, which is absolutely lovely. Now we have a choice, so if we just flip this over carefully, we can either pop these on just like this, to have them on there, you know, underneath big old fuel tanks like that, or we could have the freefall bombs. Now the freefall bombs don't go on the centre line, but if you wanted to, just to make it a little bit better, you could pop on set of freefall bombs down in the centre line just like that. It doesn't have these as standard, but if you wanted to have the fuel tanks on and you just want to make it a little bit sort of a whiffery effect, or a sort of what if, you could do that. Obviously there is other weapons that could go on there. We've obviously painted up these missiles so they can be fitted on. I'm hoping it's going to be a nice, just a standard push fit, because obviously angling them is a bit of a problem. So they are a nice little push fit. So that shows those on there. And then what you can do, once you've got it into position and your wings all in, you can straighten them up to make sure they're all in the right place. Pop your fuel tanks on as you want, everything else. So as I say, that's really about it. We've gone around and touched up the actual little probes on the back and things like that. We've done them silver. There's a little light on the tail. We've done that silver as well. All the lights and everything are all dry and on there. One thing you might be noticing that I haven't covered, certainly on, if you look on the close-up, is these guys here. These FOD covers. Now FOD is foreign object damage or debris, and basically there's covers and it stops all the nasties going down inside the actual cockpit. Sorry, the intakes, and down obviously to the engine and then the expensive bits. Got the same on the back as well, which takes care of one little small problem that the kit has, where the engines are a little bit too far apart, so it does that. Now I can't take credit for these. This was done by a colleague of mine, Hans. So what we're going to do is, obviously if you're going to follow his build as well, which is on the forum and on the site, you'll see exactly how he made those. I'm hoping he's going to allow me to put those onto the DVD as well, but obviously we'll put a link from the site to those so you can see them. The cockpit itself, if we just bring this in back here a little bit so we can get you in the close-up, the cockpit itself goes together very, very nicely, as we said before, and is in there. And now with the seats in there, it's great. Now I have got some resin seats for these, which arrived a little bit too late to use, but as I said, the seats themselves aren't too bad at all. The main problem you have with it, which is really our last bit we're going to cover here, is actually installing these canopies. What I tend to do is I'm going to use a little bit of super glue for this. So what we've got, we've got a little bit of tape down here, as you might have seen me do before. I'm going to use quite a thick super glue. Now normally, I know what I say, never use super glue when you're dealing with clear parts. Thing is, we've got quite a gap going on, and as you might be able to see on the close-up, you see I sprayed the inside grey, just taped off the clear area and shows through, so it does it just like that. So then what we're going to do, and say hopefully you can see us on the close-up as well, we're going to get in here and try and fit these on. Okay, so what happens is you've got these little pegs at the back, draw attention to the close-up. That's how they're going to go on. One of them is at a slant, and then on the inside you've got one of these under here at a slant and one's a square. Obviously the slant one goes onto the square onto the slant, and that's how it is. Now the doors themselves, if you have a look at a couple of photos of it, they actually open upwards and don't just lift up, they actually come out slightly as well. So what we're going to do, take a tiny drop of super glue and we're just going to tap it down. Okay, and hope it's onto both, just like that, and then we're just going to come along. Okay, we're going to pop it into the square one first. Okay, there we go. So that one's on there, fitted on there, just like that. Needs a little bit of clean up on there, it's a little bit dusty. But as you can see, they sort of have a funny way of going on and in. If the camera can lock in, there we go. They sit just like that. So as I say, it's not the easiest way of putting them on. And what the reason that I've used super glue, barring anything else, is that if needed to, I could tap that and it will come off. We won't have too much of a problem with it. It will just fly off, and then we can reset it, something else like that. Probably they have a little connector handle that goes from the front up to the top, which acts as a brace, which will be absolutely great. So scratch building one of them will probably help out no end, because it will help support the weight of that top canopy on there. So we'll do the same for the other side, and then we're all ready for the final reveal. Okay, and there we go, she's all done. Obviously what we've done, we've fixed on now those two top canopies. Say very fragile and delicate to do, that's why I've used super glue. That way if there is a bit of a problem, they do get knocked, they can just ping off and you can put them back on. If you use them with super glue, you might end up snapping something, or heavens forbid, you don't want to snap the canopy. So a drop of super glue goes a long way just to fix it in place. It's one of those things, it's not particularly strong, but from the worst case scenario, if it does come off, drop of super glue and you're back in business. This front radome, I've gone and given it a little bit of a weld job with cement as well. I wasn't going to originally, but the thing is, it's quite a heavy lump to have sat there and pulling down. If it does come off, hopefully it'll just come off on those. You could put some little strengthener brackets in, which would probably be a nice idea to get in there and do something like that. But certainly it does give an overall feature, and it does cut down the length by about 3 inches as well, having it round. So if you have got a storage problem, like myself with this one, not only does it look good and give you something nice to look at, it certainly will help out with the actual overall storage. If you're doing it with the wings open, it's an incredibly big aircraft. We're sort of talking a 1/32 Spitfire scale in a 148 model. Okay, we did have a few problems, to be honest. This centre seam running along the back and the belly one, because they are so flat, they are always a problem. I would say better to bite the bullet, come along, just sand and get rid of all the detail on there and fill it to get a nice perfect top to your finish, then come along with riveting. I did do a couple of coats of Mr. Surfer on it, and I've still got a tiny little bit of sinkage here and there, probably because of the speed I built the model, so you're probably better off leaving it a couple of days, allowing for the shrinkage, refill and everything else like that, because certainly the sinkage wasn't there a couple of days ago. Few things we did totally different on this one is obviously the weathering. It was lovely aircraft to weather, and certainly we've gone around and done something a little bit different with this build that we haven't done before, and we've used weathering using the wash. Now I know it's my wash, so I'm very biased to using it, but certainly I do find it the quickest and easiest way to do any type of weathering on a model, because all we do, wash goes on, wipe it off, that gives us our panel line effect, and then we can go along here and do this griminess on the bottom and everything else, and if you can hear it, it's rough like sandpaper, but it still sticks to it. You can get a little bit off, obviously you're going to leave some grime behind, but it's a nice way of doing it. Certainly as well, other little things we did around here on the front, you probably see the staining. I've done it because obviously we've got the PTO tube there, so obviously, you know, to allow what would happen naturally, and then underneath you can probably see we've got some grime under there, as it would have. Weapons fit, I know we've done a little bit of whiffery here. I've put on some freefall bombs on a centre rack, but that's because I want the gas bags on, and I wanted something sort of livening it up underneath. Normally those goes on the wings. They're a loose fit. They're actually a push fit with a tiny bit of super glue, so I have got the other one, so if I did want to interchange them, I could give them a tap, they'll drop off, and I can put on freefall bomb racks onto these wing pylons, onto these stud pylons, and go around like that. Lovely aircraft to work with, very nice doing the camo work, so I hope I showed you very nicely how to do your camo work. There again, just take your time, air pressure down low, nice thin paint and build up a layer. Don't try and paint it in one, very much one layer and go round. Other thing, we're doing totally different things like the fuel tanks and grimy sides where we want it to be nice thick paint like the nose cone, neat from the bottle, unthinned, high air pressure. It will go on, it will stick, it will coat in one thing. Downside is it's quite rough, so when you come along and do some weathering and things like that, obviously, you know, it's not going to be smooth. If you want to be smooth after that, a couple of coats of a gloss coat will help out along lovely. It's been a great build. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have, join me again next time.